In today's video, we're taking a look at some trade talk from around the league. According to one NHL insider, Erik Karlsson is not the most likely big-name player on the Sharks to be traded by the deadline. We'll discuss that scenario. Plus, could we see Tyler Bertuzzi and the Red Wings part ways with a trade possibly happening by the deadline? And I want to take a look at a recent article discussing the possibility of William Nylander pricing himself out of Toronto on his next contract after having yet another career season so far this season. Plus, we also have lots of injury updates from around the league, some more news from the Board of Governor meetings, including some scheduling changes, draft lottery news. Plus, we have a couple of side items as well from around the world of hockey. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As you can see, we have a lot to cover here in today's video. And as you can also see, I am back from vacation after almost 3 weeks of traveling, getting videos here from various locations down in Florida. We're now back home. Vacation is over. Back to the old studio. One thing that did happen while I was on vacation, I'm not sure if anybody noticed or picked up on it, but my regular microphone that I normally use actually stopped working. So if you're wondering why I have AirPods in, I'm using the built-in microphone on them to make sure the audio here is still pretty good. I've been doing it for the last little bit on vacation. The audio's turned out pretty well, so I need to get another microphone figured out. So we're kind of going back to this other method here in the interim. Now, before we jump into today's video as well, I do want to remind everybody that there is a huge sale for Christmas going on at Fanatics. Of course, one of our channel partners. We've had pretty good traffic from our channel. Go to the Fanatics page and make some purchases ahead of time. But there is a big sale going on with upwards of 70% off. Not everything site-wide is 70% off, but they do have a big holiday special going on right now with some items up to that discount. So certainly check out the pinned comment down below. You still have time to make some purchases to receive your items before the holidays. The shipping cutoff is getting close though, so I wouldn't wait much longer if you're considering getting your NHL merch for the holidays. Now, as I mentioned on the top of the video, I want to start things off with a couple of sad items from around the world of hockey, a couple of things that we did not know about. One of them actually was just something sudden that just happened here in the last day or so. But the Ontario Hockey League, part of the Canadian Junior Hockey League's London Knights, announced today that one of their players, 18-year-old Abakar Kazbekov, who's born in Russia and been playing in Canada for the last few years, died suddenly. We're not sure exactly the cause of death or what happened. I'm not sure if those details will ever be released or not. But it said 18 years old. It's his first year as a London Knight. He moved to Canada back, I think it was around 2019, I believe, is what the reports are indicating. He's been playing hockey in Canada since that time. And he played yesterday. They had a home game where they won 5-2. He was in that game. Everything seemed okay, at least at that point. I'm not sure if anything happened in the game that could have led to this. I really don't know. I didn't see the game. And then today, there's reports that he was found to have died suddenly. So we certainly want to wish our condolences to his family, the London Knights, all of his friends and family. Wasn't a player I was overly familiar with, somebody who could have been, potential draft eligible player coming up here. They're postponing their game this weekend here because of that. Obviously, they want to, have some time for their players to grieve here. It's it's just one of those things that, life is short and things happen. We don't know what happened in this case, but just a really sad story. We want to extend our condolences over to everybody impacted from this player's sudden passing. And we also got another story that's, sad and scary, but with a good outcome. Vegas Golden Knights defenseman Alex Pietrangelo, of course, we know that he's been on a personal leave in the Golden Knights, but typically when those things happen, you don't get a lot of details. And really, it's not required. Obviously, it's personal. That's why they call it that. It's up to the player if they ever want to speak to the media and divulge anything. And Alex decided to do that. Now, apparently what's happened is his 4-year-old daughter, Evelyn, originally came down with what they felt was influenza. And, of course, normally you don't get too scared over influenza, but it led to her developing some brain lesions, which is not really, I don't think, at least based on my knowledge of it, not overly super common, but it certainly had a major impact on her. So she went from having influenza to developing brain lesions, which obviously resulted in her losing her motor skills and caused her to be bedridden almost for the entirely, I think it's around 3 weeks or so that this has been going on. Now, for the past few days, apparently she's made some good breakthroughs and some excellent progress moving forward, up and walking again, and doctors have given them lots of hope that she's expected to make a full recovery, which is fantastic news, but scary when you think about it. I know, like, typically, like I said, a lot of people, especially young, healthy people, you don't really get concerned or scared when you hear, get the flu or any types of the influenza. I know not a lot of people get the flu shot. Some people do, some people don't, but another reason to maybe consider doing it. But, like, certainly, a side thing that you don't really hear of a whole lot, but it just goes to show that even though it's not something most of us are concerned about, there can be situations where it can lead to more scary situations. So I certainly want to offer our thoughts to the Pietrangelo family for what they've been going through, but great to hear that his daughter's expected to make a full recovery, and hopefully he can get back to playing hockey soon, knowing that she's recovering in good care. On to some other NHL news. We get word that Jets forward Blake Wheeler is going to be out of action for about a month, 3 to 4 weeks after having surgery, which some believe to be for a groin injury. So we'll see how they continue to play without him. Certainly a big part of their team. And defenseman Nate Schmidt, who they recently placed on injured reserve, has now been updated to be out of action for about 4 to 6 weeks as well, dealing with an upper body injury. So certainly a couple of important pieces there for Winnipeg, no longer in their lineup. Lucas Sedlak, as for the Philadelphia Flyers, has been playing. He was got picked up by the Flyers earlier this year. He's appeared in 27 games, put up 8 points. And then we got word today that he's on unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination because he decided he doesn't want to stick in the NHL anymore and is heading home to the Czech Republic. John Tortorella didn't want to say too much about him, saying he didn't want to speak for Sedlak, but that he was a good man and that he would be missed within the team. So certainly, a decision that I'm not sure if he'll ever explain or speak out about, but, something you don't obviously typically see somebody getting regular NHL time. A lot of times those players going through unconditional waivers and terminating their contracts because they're not getting NHL opportunities. So, interesting to see that. Yesterday, while I was traveling, there was another player on waivers as well, which was Oilers forward Brad Malone. He did indeed clear as well and can be reassigned now. The ESPN is reporting that one of the items being discussed at the NHL was around scheduling was expanding the schedule. Now, we had seen an article a couple days ago from Sportico talking about how the NHL was also considering scheduling changes to include more rivalry games. Well, this is like another, more information and expanded information on ESPN's behalf, talking about how they plan to do that, and that might be expanding the regular season from 82 to 84 games to create a couple extra games where they can play more division rival games. So I know that's something that they do want to focus on. It tends to do very well with ratings, does very well with the fan attendance in the buildings, and it is something important to focus on. But I wonder what the appetite will be from the NHLPA to expand the regular season. And I don't know, something that's really hasn't been done in a long time. So we'll see. It's still in the early stages of it. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's just an idea that was discussed, but certainly, something that's interesting to think about for sure. And also from the Board of Governors meetings as well, Chris Johnston, NHL Insider, is reporting that one of the other items that was discussed, it didn't seem like it was overly, really seriously being considered. It was more just a preliminary idea being kind of tossed around. And we'll see if they ever come back to it or expand on it further. But I was discussing the possibility of having the draft lottery teams play some sort of a series of games to determine the first overall draft pick in the draft rather than just do a lottery draw. Obviously, kind of making the teams earn it. It'd be a way to kind of prevent tanking, so to speak. I'm not sure exactly how the series of games would work or how many of the lottery teams would be involved, because right now, obviously, half the league's involved in the lottery. You can only move up so many spots. If you're not a bottom 10 team, you don't have a shot at first overall. And I can't imagine them having like a huge series with a lot of games. Maybe it would only be the final bottom 2 or 3 or 4 teams or something to that effect. I don't know how that would work, but it is a concept I've heard mentioned by others before. It is somewhat interesting. I don't know if it's something they'll ever go to, but it's just interesting to hear that they're actually talking about it at that level, because when I've heard it being discussed before, it was mostly just either reporters or fans talking about it. Not that anybody at the league was actually discussing it as a potential thing they would consider doing. So interesting to hear. Be curious to see if they ever come back to that. Dallas Stars forward Mason Marchment, who apparently was previously warned for embellishment and has been fined $2,000. Now, I think I didn't see this announced by NHL Player Safety, but I did see it announced from the team or one of the team reporters. Apparently, this was from an incident that took place on December the 8th in their game against the Ottawa Senators. So certainly not something you want to be known for. Somebody who's been called for embellishment. Certainly gets a reputation with the referees, and he might be less likely to get a legit call in the future. So we'll see how this impacts his game. Now, onto the trade section of the video that we want to talk about. A few rumors from around the league. We know that the Detroit Red Wings had a good start to the season, haven't been doing as well as of late. Certainly, early on, you wondered if they might challenge for a playoff spot. Now things are looking like, maybe not. After another loss today against the Ottawa Senators, the Sens are now in a situation where they've been playing extremely well in the past 10, 11 games. And I don't know if they'll really have a shot at the playoffs either, but amongst the lower teams in the division, they're putting a big surge on. The Sabres continue to play well, even though, of course, they're lower too in the standings, but they still have had a lot of good games as of late. So teams like Detroit, Montreal have been kind of going more downwards, whereas Ottawa is moving up. Buffalo's not moving up as much, but I think it has potential to. Be interesting to see how they do this year. I know it's a big year for all of them as they try to come through the next stages of their various rebuilds as they're all kind of getting reset here. And, the Red Wings made a lot of big moves in the offseason, made a lot of free agent signings. And obviously Tyler Bertuzzi is a big name that we need to watch for, between now and the deadline. Certainly between he and Dylan Larkin on expiring contracts. Be interesting to see if either or both are re-signed. I do think if I had to predict between the two that the odds of them getting Larkin done would be much greater. He's the team captain, arguably the best player, and certainly a huge part of that team. They've come this far with him leading the group. Now that they made all these moves to make them more competitive and try to come out to the next stage of the rebuild and going to challenge for playoffs. I can't imagine why they'd want to part with their captain. But of course, contract negotiations are part of the business. And sometimes it's not something they want to do, but sometimes it's the only solution they see when they can't come to terms on a new deal. And that could be the same for Bertuzzi, certainly a player who plays on the edge, can be a 30-goal scorer, can be a big part of that offense. But I do wonder if he's missed a lot of time with injuries and stuff. He's been in and out of the lineup a lot in the last couple of years. So I don't think the Red Wings, as much as they value him, want to overpay. So unless he's willing to give them a team-friendly deal, I do think the odds of them, likely moving Bertuzzi ahead of the deadline are probably pretty good. Now, Frank Saravalli talking about the San Jose Sharks. And, obviously Erik Karlsson generated a lot of trade buzz. But he said, maybe pump the brakes a little bit, that he may not be the most likely bigger name on that team to be traded ahead of the deadline, citing the fact that he feels Timo Meier is much more likely to be dealt than Karlsson, largely due to the fact that his contract is a lot easier to move. Of course, Karlsson carrying a cap hit well over $11 million a year. Even with retained money, it's still going to be expensive. Yes, he's playing at a level we haven't seen in quite some time, and it could be worth the money, but there's a lot of term, a lot of money. It's going to be way more complicated to do. Doesn't mean it won't happen. It very well could, but it's just not as easy to come together. Where Meier's on an expiring contract with a cap hit of $6 million. The main complication with Meier is he's owed a qualifying offer of $10 million next summer. So that's the big downfall there, is when they gave him his latest contract as a restricted free agent, they built that into the contract so that he would kind of do his best to have what he could be in place to guarantee himself a bigger raise on his next deal. And he's played pretty well. I'm not sure that he'd be a $10 million player, but he's certainly a very effective offensive player that's going to probably get at least 8, maybe 9. I'm not sure what he'll get. Depends on how this year goes. But it's certainly going to be not a cheap player to sign. But because of that QO being at $10 million, the Sharks are likely to not want to offer him that qualifying offer and be kind of bound to giving him that kind of money. So any team that acquires him might actually view him as a rental player, even though he's a restricted free agent. And they could use him for the playoffs, not give him a qualifying offer. He could become a UFA instead, which would probably be appealing to him at a younger age. And maybe he could get that longer-term deal worth big money wherever he goes. He'd have the pick of the litter because he'd be a hot commodity in free agency. So it makes a lot of sense that a trade out of San Jose is likely going to happen. Obviously, they're certainly needing to rebuild. He's a young player with a lot of offensive output who could generate a big return for them. And it does make sense by Saravalli's point that he is more likely to be traded than Karlsson, just given the level of complexity. But if they can get good returns on both those guys, it could be big ways here for them to really go into their rebuild and get some good assets coming back to them. Now, onto the Maple Leafs. An article from Jonas Seigel has kind of got a lot of people up in uproar here in the last 24 hours or so. I've seen this article as I was traveling yesterday, but of course, never really had time to talk about it. So I just kind of wanted to weigh in here and give my thoughts. But it goes on to talk about the fact that William Nylander might be pricing himself out of Toronto. Now, I've seen Toronto fans to a degree, and I do understand the sentiment here saying, the Leafs are having a phenomenal season right now. Why are you making up or writing articles, about things like this that could be involving the team kind of breaking up or losing a big piece of it? And it is just obviously generating interest. But it does make sense. As much as some people might not like the timing of it, it is an article that is, in my opinion, it's a good concept to talk about, because at the end of the day, two big contracts are expiring on this team in the near future, and it's William Nylander and Austin Matthews. Now, of course, they're both going to be UFAs here in the not-too-distant future. They have one more year left on the deal. I've talked about the fact before that I feel this year is critical for the Leafs not only to have regular season success, but playoff success, because they need to re-sign Austin Matthews. Can you imagine how set back this team would be if you lose a guy like Matthews? Obviously, Matthews is one of the premier goal scorers in this league. Won the Rocket before, could win it again. He's going to have the pick of the litter if he wants to take it to free agency. Now, at this point, we have no reason to think that Matthews will leave Toronto, and this is not part of the discussion today. But the fact is, if they're going to re-sign him to a new deal, some people think, and this article discusses the fact that with the salary cap going up in the next few years and looking at where the cap's expected to go over the course of his contract, that he might be able to command somewhere around $14 to $15 million per season. That's a massive deal. This team was already tied up heavy money in their top four forwards, and they very well might be forced, if they want to keep them, to continue to be that way. But that top four might have to drop to a top three, because it might be proved to be really challenging to keep Matthews and Nylander both. Nylander's having yet another career season. He might be able to put up 90 plus points. He might even hit 100 points this year. Hard to say. So that contract he signed, I know a lot of people complained about it being too rich at the time, but looking pretty good now. And really, he could go from a $6.9 million player upwards of, $10, $12 million, depending on where the cap's at himself. Imagine what he could get in free agency, especially because players often get paid more on the market than they do by their own teams to stay and get the security and sign and be part of that same group. So certainly it does make a lot of sense here that the Nylander could price himself out. If they get to re-sign both those guys with only, a $1 million cap increase likely happening this summer, and the year after maybe round 3, but both their salaries going up, probably $3 or $4 million a piece, that's even more money tied up, and just not possible to really keep both. So as much as this article does have a lot of justification and he makes some good points, the timing of it to me just kind of re-emphasizes the point that William Nylander is not going to be traded anytime soon this year. There's no doubt. But depending on how this year goes, they may be forced to look to the future, look at these contracts in the offseason, and make a move then. Whether it be, and maybe it's not Nylander that goes. Maybe it's another big piece. I don't know. They're not the only big contracts on this team, of course, but they need to be able to decide who's going to be a part of the future and who isn't. And a lot of that is likely going to be determined by if they have success in the playoffs and who really helps them generate that. If there's any passengers more than others, that could determine who they decide to keep and who ends up maybe being moved. It could be Nylander. We see Marner playing phenomenal right now. There's right now, if you look at the big guys making all the money in Toronto, you can't point a finger saying, well, this guy's not pulling his weight. They're all having phenomenal seasons. So at this point, it's really difficult to say. It's going to boil down to contract negotiations, and that's why it makes sense that Nylander might be the guy to go, especially if they're going to keep Matthews, and I'm sure that's priority number one. As much as they love Willie, I'm sure they love Austin just a little bit more. That's no doubt about it, and that wouldn't be shocking to anybody to find that out. So do you think it's possible? Does this article make sense that Nylander might price himself out of Toronto, as much as their playoff success will play a big role in determining where this team goes in the future? The regular season stats are also going to play a big role in all of these players' future contracts, which could also predict and lead us down to where the team is going and who might have to leave based on that as well. So let me know your thoughts on anything discussed here today. Down in the comments, we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.